Hi, everyone. Happy Friday.
Hello.
There we go. Marcos Jimenez. I love that dog. You got to send me a picture, Marcos. You can't get on the camera you can't get on the calendar that way. I need a still picture with a good camera. Nice to see you. I like the dog. Christina, wow. Some people I haven't seen in a while. What's up, Irma? And nice to see everyone. Hey, Sarah. Rosalind, of course. Thank you. So let's see. Happy summer, everyone. Welcome to summer. And today is an awesome summer day out there. It's fantastic. It's thank you for being here. I know many of you would rather be at the pool or at the beach, etc. But thanks for spending the half hour or so talking about some of these issues. So today it's the usual announcements. These webinars are provided for general informational purposes only. The webinars do not and cannot form an attorney-client relationship. The information exchange does not constitute legal advice. To obtain legal advice, you must contact or contract with an attorney directly and enter into a written retainer agreement and present your particular facts. No information discussed during these webinars will be kept confidential. So that is the disclaimer. Oh, we have somebody waiting to get on here. There we go. So today's topic is social media, etc. And just so everyone knows, and you can write this down, I am not endorsing this person or all of his views, but I found a very good article by a man named Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, Jonathan Haidt, and it was published in The Atlantic, which is a magazine with an online version, and they have no paywall. So if you want to look at the article yourself, you can just go on and look at the article yourself too. But it's a nice article. It's called "Why the Past 10 Years of American Life Have Been Uniquely Stupid." And again, that's in The Atlantic. It's by Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T. Covers a lot of these issues. I don't agree with everything he says. Obviously, none of us will agree on everything, but he gives a nice overview of some of the topics we're going to talk about today. So, dog of the day. Do we lose the dog of the day?
No, we got.
Oh, okay, there we go. Dog of the day. So we do have a dog of the day. Let's see. So that is Kobe. That's actually the dog butt of the day. So it's dog butt today. Helping out with some plumbing. That's Jeff Schiffman's dog, I believe. And I think that's probably Jeff's son under there, looking like replacing a garbage disposal, maybe. Anyway, thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Kobe. Appreciate it. I don't think that one's going to make the calendar. Again, we try to get the front ends of the dogs we put on the calendar. But thanks for saying that in, Jeff. So that's dog of the day. Your association's website. Don't tell me you don't have one, right? So please, everyone online today, I assume, has a website, if not a social media account. Because, and you all know this already because we've talked about this a lot before, if you don't tell your own story, someone else will tell your story for you, right? Someone else will tell your story for you. So tell your own story. You're an association, you're a leadership team. If you're a board member or management, you have to tell your own story, because otherwise, who tells your story, right? We know this already. The nihilists, the wackos, the people who are just out there for the purpose of chaos. So tell your own story, create a website, even if it's just an informational page. It doesn't have to be updated every 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be updated every day. Create the website, build the website, maintain it if you can, communicate your story, right? It builds trust. It builds relationship with your membership rather than being involved, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, in a tit for tat. Well, Mary Jones posted on Facebook the following. Kenny Thompson posted the following on Facebook or Twitter or what have you. Tell your story first. Instead of being reactionary, set your own agenda, get the information out there. You are then controlling not only the substance of the information, you're controlling your pipeline as an association. Also, if you have, if you're going to do that, or if you have done it already, I strongly discourage bulletin boards, right? So I'm not a fan of bulletin boards. So some people will say, as our association website, we're going to have a bulletin board tab area where members can come up and say and do whatever they want on our official website. I find that to be a bad idea because it does a couple things. Typically, the negative people come on and rant and rant and rant and rant and rant. And they also attempt to do things like work orders through a bulletin board rather than reaching out in the proper channels to your managers or your management professionals and generating a work ticket that then can be processed and then closed out and then will show up on a work ticket report the following month. So I find generally it's not a good idea to do a bulletin board function on your website. So back to the topic of the article though. So let's assume everyone has a website and you're telling your own story. That's fantastic. What happened and what is this gentleman, Mr. Haight, talking about when we talk about social media? His timing of it when social media went from, we'll say, good to bad or kind of got out of control was he's marking the year between 2009 and 2010. And I think this is a pretty decent analysis of it. You know, certainly we had factionalism and extremism before the rise of social media, right? So we had very, very left-leaning media outlets. We had very right-leaning media outlets and things like television, cable TV especially, and in various radio station markets, right? So we had that, but why is it different now? And his argument, and I think it's a pretty good one, is that it started in 2009 and 10 with the rise of functionality on platforms like Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, with the like button, you know, the retweet button for retweeting things, and the share button on various platforms. And I think it's a pretty good argument that did kind of mark the beginning of this. Because up to that point with social media, people like Facebook, et cetera, were putting things on their Facebook page and everyone got to look at their grandchildren's picture and it was nice and it was good and we could all look at each other's cousins and people were taking pictures of what they had for dinner last night, and I don't know why, and putting them on the internet and wasting our time, but I guess it wasn't a waste of their time. But then when we got to the 2009, 2010 era with the rise of like, retweet, and share, people would say, hey, well, Fran, why do we care about that? Why do we care about that? For a number of reasons. One of them being these platforms tend to guide the content that you're exposed to based on what you mark as liked, what you mark for retweet, and what you mark as sharing, right? So not only do you like something, you think, hey, I just said I liked it. I liked somebody protesting about whatever. That content, because of the various logarithms in the internet platform, will start to steer content, like-minded content to you, such that there's a tendency towards extremism, right? It will continue to reinforce whatever opinion you liked. I'm not taking any opinions today on left or right or center or whatever the topic is, but the actual systems, when you like, when you share, when you retweet a Twitter post, will continue to reinforce what you're liking, so that there's a tendency that people then thereafter are continually getting reinforcement of what their original opinion was. And it tends to, we'll say that, block out alternate opinions, block out alternative views, block out a diversity of opinion. And I think that makes some sense that this guy's arguing that that's the case. I think it makes some sense. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but I think it actually does happen to an extent. There's another thing that he says, and I think this is true, and I think many of you have experience with this with your membership, especially if they're posting on Facebook platforms and other platforms like that, that there's, whereas in the early days of the social media phenomena, it was, like I said, it's friends and families posting pictures and talking about events and concerts and songs and things like that. And instead it shifted from that to the posters, or many of the posters, to putting on a performance and managing their brand. Like, so I'm the angry guy, right? And I'm going to continually post my angry stuff because everyone knows Bob or Kenny is the angry guy who hates the association and will oppose anything the association does, right? And his feed, his Twitter feed or his Facebook page or what have you, continues to feed and reinforce not only himself, but his, I guess, acolytes, they would say that. Yeah, it's the right word, maybe. But the people who follow him, right? So, and I think there is some truth to that. People do wind up creating an image or a brand for themselves, and then they continue to reinforce it, and they continue to drive their message. And the viral nature of that, has an echo chamber effect, right? So then not only do you have Angry Harry putting the stuff out there, Angry Harry then gets content more driven back to him about being angry about whatever issue Harry is angry about, right? Whether it's regulating how landscaping should be done, whether it's whether or not the building code should be improved because of the collapse in Florida, whether or not it's speeding in the community, et cetera. Whatever his issue is, not only will he get the feedback that he's angry about, which reinforces his anger, his followers, Twitter followers, Facebook followers, whatever, will get the same message constantly. Okay. The other thing that this article highlights is that generally speaking, and this apparently applies based on the research that he cited, the author, that generally the extremes, whether it's the left in politics or the right in politics, the extremes are relatively small vis-a-vis the rest of your entire populations. However, social media has greatly magnified and weaponized their reach, right? So where again, 10, 15 years ago, everyone knew the one wacko. You guys know this already from hearing me before. There's always 5 wackos in every community. It's never one, right? Because wackos have a hard time living on their own. It's usually 5. But the reach of social media, regardless of what the issue is, can magnify their impact on your community and within the residents of your community much more than it historically could. So the other thing is too that, and this research shows coming from the article, is that many times the goal of posting leaves the area of information and argument, right? It leaves the area of information and argument and instead tends toward a goal of shaming, right? Public punishment or social death, right? A social assassination, right? That it's not, I don't like your position on construction codes. I don't like your position on speeding. I don't like your position on what hours the pool are open. Instead of doing any of that, I am posting things about why you're a hated person, why you should be ashamed of yourself, and why nobody should speak to you anymore in the community. Okay. And I think there is some truth in that. Knock on wood, for the most part, I don't see it at many communities, but it has ticked up somewhat. In terms of the social media and the postings, et cetera, and the likes, what has led to, and I have seen this, and probably all of you have seen this too, is factionalism, right? So small and narrow factions. And there's a tendency toward factionalism, even when there's not a true basis for an argument among the group. Human nature seems to be that people will find a reason to disagree, right? There's always going to be Angry Harry somewhere, even if he doesn't have a whole lot to be angry about. So many of you heard the speech in front of audiences when I go to a place. I'll just make up an example. One of the more premier active adult communities, and you know who you are, and I stand on the stage there and I'll have somebody just ripping the board apart and saying what an awful place this is, and I can't believe I'm even living here, and it's disgusting. And I say, really? Really? And they're going to sue the association, et cetera. And what I say sometimes is, well, you know what I would do if you sued the association saying what a disaster this community is and what a disaster the people in this community are, is I would take the jury on a bus tour through this community, because this community is unbelievable, right? This community is a Disney World of residential living in many respects. Now, I am exaggerating somewhat, but in many respects, right? So you'll have people who are attacking the board incredibly aggressively about why the outrage of it, the heartbreak of not having the pickleball court lines restriped, right? Just the heartbreak of the stripes being kind of worn out, right? And how are they going to go on with their lives, with such awful things happening to them? There is a total loss of perspective, right? There's a total loss of perspective. And the problem is that with a social media access like that, someone can leverage that to a degree that really hurts the board and undermines the board and undermines volunteerism. It has certainly cost us in the ranks of quality managers. It has certainly hurt us in the ranks of quality board members too, because what is really the worst thing that can happen? The quality people walk away, right? The quality people walk away. So you have good managers, you have good board members who are serving, giving their time, and working for the community, and they are either silenced and shut up because they're afraid to say anything, because they don't want to wake up tomorrow morning with a post that says, Bob is blah, 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 you fill in the blank, or Mary is blah, 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 fill in the blank. So the non-jerks, we'll say the non-jerks walk away. And if they don't walk away, there's a very strong tendency for the moderates on the association's issues to be silenced, right? To be silenced, not to engage the people. So that can be a very difficult and challenging thing. Research, again, cited in the article, and this is human nature, right, tends to show that posts that trigger emotional responses get the most likes, get the most forwards, right? Get the most shares, the most retweets, right? It's emotional. More importantly, the ones that are most negative also get the highest number of retweets, likes, shares, etc. And in addition, and you know this already, the internet provides a certain level of anonymity, right? So people don't have to say, I'm posting this and it's from Fran McGovern, right? The guy whose office is in North Brunswick, New Jersey. No, not only can you post very cheaply, you can post negative things, you can also post anonymously, which tends to do what? Allow people to be dishonest, to post things that are not even nearly true, and to increase mob dynamics, regardless of who the mob is, right? In terms of your community, right? Because sometimes the one wacko grows into 5 wackos, which grows into 25 wackos, which grows into 50 wackos, and they take over the board. And I have found this myself. Although this type of thing, this is the shame about, and there are some political theorists who think this is a rule. I don't think it's an absolute rule, but distributed networks like Twitter, like Facebook, etc., they can overthrow things, right? They can overthrow corporations, they can overthrow governments, they can overthrow association boards, and things like that. But what can they not do? Generally speaking, they can't govern, right? So they can go out there and post all kinds of craziness and get management fired and oust the manager and oust the board and get those people run out of office. But are they going to run the place? What are they offering? And what I have seen so far is in that type of situation? The answer is nothing. They're not offering anything other than venom, right? Venom, just venom. And that's another, it's a different version of the old school nihilists or the wackos who were just out there to tear down the board. So when we get to the tit for tat mistakes, what are we talking about? So again, it goes back to having a website or having an official association communication organ, right? Whether it's a social media platform or a website, must be done, because if it's not done, the tit for tat goes on, where, as I said before, Bob posts that the association's landscapers are stealing, right? Bob posts that, and then Joanne has to respond saying, no, these landscaping are wonderful and they do a great job. You know, and this just goes on and on and on, and the association's board is constantly playing defense. Not only is it constantly playing defense, the agenda is being set by the jerk, right? So the association is not setting its own agenda in terms of discussion topics. The jerk is. So every time the jerk comes up with a new theory of how the manager is stealing, the board has to come back and say, no, the manager is not stealing. And by the way, if you feel the manager is stealing, please present the evidence of the theft, because we would be more than happy. In fact, we have a duty to investigate it. But as many of you know, when you hear those kind of claims, the silence is deafening when you ask for the evidence, right? So it is set the agenda. Don't do tit for tat. If you know the person who's doing this type of stuff through social media or otherwise, but typically today it's through social media. I like this. A lot of people are uncomfortable with it. You can decide amongst yourself whether it is you're comfortable with picking up the phone and saying, Bob, hey, I noticed that you sent out a tweet that the manager is stealing. Can we talk about that? And oftentimes Bob is silent on the other end because Bob has nothing. And what more importantly, the association can do is post on its own materials what the association's manager is doing, what our practices are, what our relationship with management is, how we have open meetings, and why we have open meetings. The trouble with many of these things and some of the solutions suggested by the author of that article is a social relationship like this, a real one beyond the social media, has to be built on a certain level of trust, right? So a certain level of trust and strong institutions. In your case, the strong institution is the association. But the only way to build strong trust in an association and in a management company is to actually perform and be transparent. Even after Radburn, I go to board meeting after board meeting where the board says, we're just going to do this stuff and we're not going to worry about it, and we will ratify it next month or the month after or the month after. And that just undermines trust. It just undermines trust. Some of you who are on the call with me today, you know how difficult it has been for us to even get boards to have meetings. It's been almost impossible in some cases to have meetings for the board, and the board members themselves are resisting meetings. But the only way to build trust and avoid the wackiness on the social media, and ultimately to avoid lawsuits, is to work as hard as we can to compel the meetings to happen, to compel the meetings to be on proper notice, and to compel that all the issues are being discussed in a transparent way at the association's board meeting. So that's kind of it right now. I do have some questions, I think, coming up. Oh, one thing, I am not going to talk about constitutional law today, but the Supreme Court, right? It's constitutional analysis. The Supreme Court is issuing all kinds of really interesting rulings. I'm not going to talk about the substance of them. Certainly not going to talk about today. But probably next month or the month after, I'm going to talk about some of the, let's say, procedural things in the Supreme Court, what's happening at the Supreme Court level, and kind of the evolution. I'm not a constitutional scholar, but kind of the evolution of some of the things that are going on in the court, because as we go, and Mike's here with us today too, as Mike and I go to meetings, and people invariably are going to say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? I'm not interested in getting into the substance of the actual issue, whether it's gun control or abortion or religious school funding or vouchers or those other things, but talk about the actual nature of the Supreme Court and kind of what we're seeing recently at the federal level, and how that kind of in the state of New Jersey will put us in a somewhat different position with respect to all types of issues, not just gun, not just abortion, not just school vouchers and things like that, but could put us in a very different position politically, because as you know, and I think I've talked about this before, the state of New Jersey has a very strong constitution of its own, right? That provides for many things that are not necessarily the same as the federal constitution, or how it's interpreted or how it's applied. So I'm not going to talk about that today. The one thing I will say, regardless, is that violence in any case, regardless of what your political stripe is not free speech. No matter what anyone says on morning television, violence is never free speech. That is just not free speech. So that's that. The other last note on the social media thing. I did not know this, but apparently, with artificial intelligence, the ability of bots and artificial intelligence programs has evolved so much that social media is now being flooded with articles and posts created not by people at all. And it's not just likes. It's not just likes, where in the past there were bots, right? The bots who would just go, and remember the whole Russian thing like 9-10 years ago, where Russia was apparently doing some type of information thing where they were like generating likes and people had fake accounts and stuff. Not that, way more sophisticated than that, where actually computer artificial intelligence programs are writing articles. You can give them a topic, you can give them a tone, if you will, of the article, and it will write an article. This is unbelievable to me. One of the programs is called GPT-3. It's called Generative Pre-trained Transformer, 3rd generation. And apparently it will write articles that most people cannot distinguish between a human written article or a human written post and a machine written post. So that really, really, really has to keep us on our toes in terms of not worrying about who's posting what, but telling our own story, and not letting people believe posts that may have nothing to do with reality, or may have been even posted by machines. So keep in mind the AI and the bot stuff, because that is evolving very quickly. My understanding is that Microsoft itself bought the rights to GP3 recently, and they're playing around with it. I don't know what they're going to do with it, but they're playing around with it. It can be a great thing, right, for advertisers and marketing people, right, because you can just have articles written on various topics automatically and very quickly and cheaply. But at the same time, it can be a real problem from a disinformation standpoint. We did have a couple posts in there. Thank you for joining. Should management company have control of the website? So generally speaking, management companies will host a website or will assist the board in setting up the website and going through a vendor hosting website platform. But my experience is that management companies typically do not control the editorial content, right? So the board or a board member or a board member and committee members will provide the editorial content, or at least review and edit the editorial content, what goes in there. So you have your normal stuff, the things that people think are boring, right? Your agenda, your meeting minutes, etc. You usually have something like a president's message. But generally speaking, the management company may maintain it, but they don't do all the editorial comments. You may have a manager's report in there. That may not be a bad idea, because that usually the manager has more day-to-day information than even most of the board members. But usually management doesn't do the whole thing. You just have the manager's report. Mike posted an interesting post. I've never seen it regarding anonymous posting. He says the word for it is called keyboard courage. I've never heard of keyboard courage, but that makes sense, right? I can be a tough guy when I'm anonymous behind my keyboard and throwing all kinds of nonsense out there. But as soon as I'm called on it, I really don't have much to say. Terry says, do bylaw amendments need to be handled like elections regarding ballot anonymity and public counting? Mike, I think you checked on that recently, but I think the answer is yes. I believe so, yeah.
Say that one more time, Fran, I'm sorry.
So Terry had asked, do bylaw amendments need to be handled like elections regarding ballot anonymity and public counting? Terry, I think the answer is yes. I'll check it.
Yep.
Yeah,
it is. So yeah, we had looked into this, and even if it's a rejection ballot, it still needs to be anonymous, which if you think about it, doesn't make much sense, because if you're returning the ballot, it's going to have an envelope with the person's name on it. And obviously we know how they voted because it's only a rejection ballot, but the ballot itself still needs to be anonymous. This is from the DCA.
Right. And I think, Terry, there was a recent DCA opinion put out on that, actually.
Yeah, it was from their commentary. Yeah, so they addressed it.
Yeah, right from their commentary, like reaffirming that, which again, as Mike said, it doesn't make much sense because on a rejection ballot, they're voting no. So what's the point? But so the answer to your question is yes. Alba says, what is your recommendation to new board members that are using private social media accounts to create or discuss committees that have not been board approved or even discussed? Shouldn't this all be done at open board meetings? So yes, Alba, yes, this should be done, in my view, as part of the open process, that doing it outside of the association's general website or the association's we'll say official social media platform only serves to factionalize the community, to create separation when there's no need for separation, and it hurts the entire community in doing that. And I think, I'm somewhat familiar with your situation there, and I think that although some of that may be well-intentioned, I think that if it continues, it's going to hurt the community. I don't think it necessarily will continue, but I think that board members, whether they're old board members or new board members, should keep in mind that everyone views them as board members representing the entire community, and not just their own particular group, whatever that group may be. So some people will say, I'm taking off my board member hat. Well, you can't take off your board member hat. Your board member hat is on. That does not mean that once you become a board member, that there's a gag order on you and you can't talk about association issues or association business on your own post. You can, but you can't disclose confidential information. And you should do it in such a way that is inclusive to all, rather than attempting to cultivate just your particular set of supporters, if you will. Where do we find the DCA commentary? I have a hard copy of it, Terry. I think I have a PDF copy as well. I'll look for that. So Terry was asking, where do you find the DCA commentary? I will get a copy of that to you. And if anybody else, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say the commentary is from the when they posted their initial proposed DCA regulations. It was open to the public. And then CAI and a bunch of other individuals submitted commentary to the DCA. They then basically printed out all their questions and went through and explained all their answers on how things should be addressed.
Right.
About 112 pages.
And we've talked about that before, but I think there may be a more recent, just as to that, Mike. I'll have to look.
Mm-hmm.
I think there may be a more recent, more particular one on that.
Hey, Fran, just to make everyone aware, just another good use for a website for communities. The DCA requires that within a week after your annual election, you need to come out with your agenda for the next year board meetings, for all your open board meetings. So we're supposed to be doing that. Instead of mailing it to everybody, it states that we can post it on a website or post it at the clubhouse. So putting it on the website is a pretty good idea. And also, at least a week before each open board meeting, we're supposed to put a notice of the board meeting and a copy of the agenda. Again, that can be just posted on the website as well. It's a lot easier than dealing with mailings and emails and all that.
Right. Okay, that's it. I guess everyone wants to go home or hit the beach. I hope I wasn't boring today. I felt boring today. I hope I wasn't too boring. I felt boring. So anyway, we will be back next month, and we'll talk a little bit about the Supreme Court and try really hard not to get into any substantive issues. So thank you and have a great 4th of July. Happy Independence Day. Bye, Marcos, and bye, Mini Marcos there. I see Mini Marcos with you. Have a great day and have a great holiday.